joining us for thank you, Ray. Started the land you're standing on. To many First Nations. We also acknowledge that Toronto team also acknowledge treaty people. Speaking here particularly as they patron the ancestors and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to give a very agenda. Start by introducing our guests as well as of our gender diversity transition opportunity to open to questions on I will ask you to ask your question to add a comment or question into the chat function of either or YouTube. The question to our. As we begin, I'd like to first introduce our panel. Chief James Raymer, Chief of the Chief uses him. He will be delivering welcoming remarks. And the Chief is Superintendent Lisa Kruger. Superintendent Kruger uses the pronoun she and procedural policy changes that have been following the superintendent. We have Dr. J. Wallace Skelton. J does not use pronoun through the training that have been changed as part of this program. I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge in the room who has been service this project, as well as Deputy Chief Myron Demkew. This project and joins this evening. I will hand over to Chief Raymer.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this important conversation. We look forward to hearing from you tonight about our efforts to revise procedures and training protocols to better serve trans and gender diverse members of the community. Your feedback is essential to this process. I know there remains a deep sense of pain, trauma, and mistrust from members of trans and gender diverse communities. This comes from past police interactions that were not always handled with the respect and dignity they deserved. These failures are unacceptable. Through this ongoing work, I hope we can mend these relationships and commit to doing better as we move in a new direction together. I would like to thank J. Wallace Skelton, our expert consultant, Superintendent Lisa Kruger, Roseanne Bailey, and Ty Smith of our Equity Inclusion team and members of the Advisory Committee for their tireless work on this project. Thank you as well to Mr. Boyd Kodak, who was instrumental in bringing these issues to light and continues to provide us with valuable guidance. It's been a decade of work for Mr. Kodak, and we appreciate that Boyd is online today. I also want to acknowledge Deputy Chief of Police Myron Demkew, who is our executive lead on this project and has joined us this evening. I know the community has been frustrated with us, concerned about our willingness to move forward and make these changes. I want to thank you for your patience. We have faced several delays along the way, including the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are pleased to announce that our policies and procedures are now publicly available on our website. Our mandatory member training will also begin rolling out in March. You will be given a detailed overview of these initiatives this evening, and we would ask you to consider actively participating in the discussion this evening. By asking questions and offering your feedback, we can continue to make the changes needed. I want to be clear that this work is not over. This is a continuous journey, and we are committed to getting it right. We know that it is a process, and we are committed to listening to community. Thank you for your ongoing involvement. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your assistance. Over to you, Dr. J.
Thank you. So I want to say good evening and welcome. I know that for folks listening, this may be a challenging event to attend, and your participation and guidance has been invaluable and will continue to be invaluable. So I want to thank folks for joining us this evening. I've been working on this project as a consultant to advise on changes to policy, procedure, and forms, to engage in community consultation, and ensure that trans and gender diverse voices are included, that non-binary people and two-spirit people are part of this process. I've also been involved in working on developing the training components, which will be mandatory for all TPS employees. This has been a long and difficult piece of work for members of our community, and I want to really acknowledge Boyd Kodak, for whom this journey began in 2014. He's a trans man who was arrested by TPS and treated in ways that were not appropriate and not okay. As a result of his treatment, and I will talk more about that in a moment, he filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission in 2014, which was resolved, or the minutes of settlement came out in 2016. Mr. Kodak's experience included being in women's sections, both in police housing and in correctional facilities, having gender-affirming articles taken away from him, being forced to wear women's clothing, being released in women's clothing, and facing harassment while in custody. We want to be clear that that should not have happened and was not acceptable. This settlement from his complaint has really driven a number of these changes. His ongoing involvement in the process helps guide this work. And really, this is work to show that Toronto Police Service can provide service to vulnerable community members. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Crocker.
Thank you, Jay. As part of our commitment to the settlement, we worked with Jay, the advisory committee, and the trans community to revise our policies, procedures, and make them available to the public. This new standard of conduct involved revising the respect for gender diversity and trans inclusive policing policy, mainly in the areas of human rights, news media, search of persons, and persons in custody and their property. It also involved changes to TPS forms by adding the standard of self-identification and expanding options for gender disclosure. The new standard also requires that Toronto Police Service members treat people of all gender identities and expressions with respect, courtesy, and consideration. This will be accomplished in the following ways as outlined in the policy. Ensuring Toronto Police Service members address individuals by their name, pronoun, and gender that aligns with their gender identity. Making sure individuals have access to facilities, clothing, and personal items to support their gender identity and expression. Respecting privacy and confidentiality of individuals in regard to their gender identity and expression, and conducting themselves in a manner that is inclusive, respectful of trans and gender diverse individuals. In addition, the Toronto Police Service members shall not intentionally or repeatedly misgender an individual or use offensive language relating to gender identity. This will not engage in gender bias policing or use someone's gender identity as a basis for suspicion. Along with our continued work with Jay and with the GDTI Advisory Committee, we are engaged the community throughout this process. beginning with public meetings at 519 in February of 2020. We developed a web-based survey in 2020 and conducted extensive interviews with trans individuals from September 2020 to January 2021. We would like to thank everyone who took part and participated in this process and have their voices heard. Going forward, we will be hosting a second community consultation in March to get feedback on how we can evaluate and work towards the work being done. I will now hand this back over to Jay to review the training modules.
We have, I'm going to say we because I really want to credit the work of the advisory involved in putting this together. We've created 2 mandatory trainings, both of which are e-learning modules, and we have worked hard to make them be e-learning modules that are engaging and informative, because I want people to know that this is connected to people's real lives and keeping real people safe. A mandatory training for all TPS employees, and so that's uniform officers, that's civilians, all employees, focusing on awareness and empathy building trans and gender diverse, barriers that trans and gender diverse people face, terms, words we use, how to show respect. This includes community videos, people talking about what they want from police and their own lives and experience. We are including tests across the module after each section and a branching scenario at the end. So we're really looking for people taking the training to be able to demonstrate that they are learning the skills and able to put them into action. The second training will be mandatory for sworn officers and court officers and focuses on how do we put the policies into action? What does that look like? It's specific ways to show respect in policing roles. It covers all of the policy changes. It includes tests again across the module and ends again with a branching scenario and a final test. Once they are released, TPS employees will have 6 months to successfully pass both modules. What's in the modules? In the first module, which we are calling towards trans-inclusive policing, community experience, we'll make sure people know what they're coming into. It's fair to orient people to their learning processes. We have a video from the chief to contextualize the training for members, because it's essential that members know support for this project comes from the top. We talk about where this work has come from. We credit Mr. Kodak's efforts to make this happen. We acknowledge the Human Rights Commission's involvement in this. We have a pre-assessment, so members are thinking about these topics ahead of time, and we're able to pay attention to what knowledge people have coming in. We discuss the legal framework in Canada, Ontario, Toronto, and protections that are in place around gender identity and gender expression. We have community voices where we're hearing from trans people. We discuss terms and language so that people are able to talk to trans people, with trans people, and about trans people respectfully and with dignity. We discuss the basics of demonstrating respect in TPS staff roles, what that might look like, what is expected. And then we finish with a branching scenario to have people go through what might this mean in action. And we're looking for people to demonstrate that they can choose the best possible option at each step of the branching scenario. We're including resources. We want people to feel like they are supported, they have access to more learning, and that there are other sources in the community, and we will engage in post-evaluation. So we have some images from the training modules. We want to show images partly to say the intention is to be warm and engaged and personal, and to think about people's whole lives. So this is the start of the training module, module number 1. And again, we're orienting people to what they should expect. And so we're letting people know that each section includes information, resources, and a short quiz, that people will need to be successful in each quiz in order to advance to the next section, and really have built in multiple ways to ensure people are engaging with the material and can't just advance through it. Because it's important to also hear members of the Toronto Police Service speak to these matters, We have a number of videos from people within the service as well. And we're going to share a couple of those this evening. And so this is a video of Rob Chevalier, the LGBTQ2S+ liaison officer, and I'm going to let him speak.
It's important police recognize that trans and gender diverse people are populations that experience increased levels of discrimination and violence and are in need of police protection. According to Statistics Canada, discrimination and violence toward individuals based on their gender or sexual orientation is widespread. Incidents targeting gender diverse people were more often violent in nature, with 80% of incidents involving in violence. Toronto Police Hate Crime Unit identified LGBTQ people as one of the 3 groups most often targeted by hate crimes, and notes that the LGBT community was the most frequently victimized group for criminal harassment occurrences.
As we move into Module 2, we're thinking specifically about what does this mean for policing roles? What both do police need to do in order to offer safety and respect to trans and gender diverse people, and what can trans and gender diverse people expect? Again, we are starting with a message from the chief, again, to contextualize the work and to be clear that support for this is across the organization and comes from the top. We review Toronto Police Service policies, procedures, orders, and forms, and move through how this fits within a broader context of existing police procedures, orders, and forms. We talk about why the changes have been made and what they mean. We begin with the standard of conduct, which we've already shared this evening. We have video pieces of both police officers and, again, community members. We have branching scenarios, and again, we had community members be part of that filming process. We discuss how someone might be searched in a way that is respectful and focuses on not causing trauma or harm, and how to house people in custody. Again, we're including resources and wanting people to know that there is a robust range of places they can go for additional information and a post-evaluation. And again, people will need to pass this successfully. It's not enough to just see it or engage with it. Ty Smith of the Equity and Inclusion and Human Rights unit here at TPS, Special Projects Consultant, has been instrumental in doing work on this project. I'd like to thank him and share one of the videos that he has contributed to the project.
It's not uncommon that a transgender or non-binary person's ID shows a different name than the one they give. This may be your first moment of knowing that someone is trans or gender diverse. You can't always tell by looking. Remember, there are many reasons why a person may not have changed their ID to reflect their name. Not having done so is not an indication of deception or fraud. Changing name and sex markers on one's ID is an expensive and time-consuming process. Changing your name and sex marker on identity documents requires a stable address and a family doctor to verify one's gender. It costs hundreds of dollars and can take months to apply, receive multiple copies of the order, visit offices in person, and pay for each new ID. And it's dangerous to begin unless you can complete it, because mismatched ID can be interpreted as fraudulent in some situations. People whose employment or housing depend on not disclosing their transgender status may be additionally curtailed from making these changes. When a person you encounter gives their name and it's different to what their ID shows, you must call them by the name they give consistently. For easier remembering, fold a notebook page over and write their name on it, so you can hold their ID below with other relevant details like address, or hand it back if you don't need to hold on to it. Any form you may use now has a place for someone's name and their legal name, or other known names. If these differ, the name a person gives is their name, the name they know themselves by, and is the most important one. It is not an alias. A legal name or other previous names has its own line on the form, if different.
And to be really clear, in a commitment to recognizing someone's self-knowledge of their identity, their self-identified name, their self-identified pronouns. We are recognizing that people know who they are and are right about themselves, and ensuring that that will be respected. So again, orienting people to the second training module, ensuring that it's interactive, ensuring that they can access additional material and resources all the way through, ensuring that they can find definitions and other terms. We want to make sure people are not surprised and that people feel like they are able to engage deeply in the learning. We have a video from me as well. Most people are comfortable when their gender expression, the way they look, matches their gender identity, how they understand themselves inside. People who are trans and gender diverse do a variety of things to give themselves the comfort and safety in their body. Some people might choose to wear wigs, so they have hair that matches their self-understanding of themselves. Other items people might use, we talked about gaffs as a clothing item you could use to tuck external genitalia out of the way and give a smooth shape and form. Some people might use tape to tuck external genitalia out of the way and to tape it back. When you see these items on someone, you want to make sure that you are treating them with additional respect, that you are talking in a way that indicates this is something people do and is about how they understand themselves. Trans people who have larger chests and who want a flatter appearance may use binders or may use a tensor bandage to flatten things. While a binder is safer, it keeps someone's lungs able to move and able to breathe smoothly, both of them get used by people to feel comfortable in their bodies and in their skin. This sense of who people are is incredibly important to them. When you are handling a gender-affirming item, you want to do so respectfully. You want to not be showing it off. You want to not be touching it like it is something that is dirty or unpleasant. You want to make sure that as few people as possible see it. When you're storing it, you want to store it in a brown paper bag so it's not visible and can't be seen if you cannot return it to someone. And ideally, you are returning it to someone so their sense of who they are is intact and present at all times. One further item to be aware of is that trans people have specific medical needs. And so if you're keeping someone in custody, you may need to know what their medical needs are. They may need access to hormones. And for trans men, this probably means testosterone, which could be a patch form, which could be an injection, and it could be a cream. And for trans women, this is probably estrogen, often in tablet form. Some trans women may need medically access to dilators in order to ensure that a neovagina or a vagina that's been made through vaginoplasty doesn't get harmed. Neovaginas can sometimes close if they are not regularly dilated. And so a trans woman may medically need access to dilators. Tools that look like this, that would be used with lube. And just to be clear that this is about a medical need and not about a sexual gratification. So they're solid items, they're smooth, they're probably recommended by her doctor. We wanted to make sure that when an officer is dealing with a trans or gender diverse person, this is not the first time they're seeing gender affirming items. It's not the first time they are thinking about how to treat them respectfully. And we want to put the emphasis on returning items to someone as much as possible.
Thank you, Jay and Lisa and Chief Raymer. I just wanted to take the opportunity to repeat some of the comments I made in the introduction. I understand there were some audio issues. Now that we've had this presentation, there will also be several questions that we will be asking for your feedback on, as well as your general comments or questions about the material that we've just presented. If you are on YouTube, you can enter your comment or question into the chat function. Similarly, if you're using WebEx, you can use the chat function, or the raise hand function, and I'll ask you to pose your question to a member of our panel. We also have a survey that is live that we will be talking about, where you can provide your feedback over the survey. And as well, we'll have an opportunity to talk about our next upcoming consultation session scheduled for March 23rd of this year. We're going to first start talking about evaluation before we move on to the questions and comments from the audience.
So evaluating for the Toronto Police Service, this phase has not started yet. Community input will be sought on how they will want this work to be assessed. It's critically important that we capture that information from the community. It will use a variety of measures, including feedback from the people after interactions with the police. We're scheduling the beginning of the consultations for the fall, but expect the evaluation to start a year after the Toronto Police Service employees have received their training. So we're looking at March 2023. So just to go through, we have 5 questions that we have posed, and just to share this with you. What we're looking for evaluation is, what kind of change would you like to see if police officers in their interactions with members of the trans and gender diverse communities as a result of the training from the Toronto Police Service is providing? How do you think the Toronto Police Service should be evaluated to demonstrate that the training provided to the members is effective? What kind of change would you like to see in the Toronto Police Service as a result of implementing the policies and procedures Toronto Police Service has been recently revised and updated? How do you think the Toronto Police Service should be evaluated to demonstrate that newly revised and updated policies and procedures are effective? Please identify the top 3 things the Toronto Police Service need to do to demonstrate accountability in its relationships with gender diverse and trans community. These are the questions that we're posing and would be seeking feedback.
Just give us 1 minute here we'll close out the presentation and open up the screen again for sharing. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have a question or comment that they'd like to pose to our panel this evening? Having not seen any hands raised at the moment, please, again, I'd encourage you to either use the raise hand function on WebEx, or you can enter your comment or question in the chat function, either on WebEx or on YouTube. Perhaps I'll ask the chief just to reiterate some of his comments at the beginning about the Toronto Police Service's journey in getting to where we are today with our Gender Diverse and Trans Inclusion Project. Chief?
Yeah, frankly, I just want to emphasize that, our genuine and sincere commitment for change. We really very much want to work with the community to improve this relationship, and that frankly, we have just not done the job over the years that we should have been doing. And I want to encourage the participation, because this is not a final product. It's something that we've learned in recent years, that we're just not just providing procedures or changes in the organization and telling communities, here's the change and here's what it is. The way we approach change now with communities is to receive input and understand that it will be a ongoing journey, and that it will essentially be an evergreen project. So if what we put forth is not working effectively and it needs to be changed and improvements need to be made, we're going to continue to do this. So it will be an ongoing project. And I just want to assure everyone the commitment of the service to actually make these changes as we go forward, and strongly encourage your participation to make this better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We do have a question in the chat from our YouTube stream. I'm going to ask that Superintendent Crooker perhaps talk about some of the changes we've made in our procedures, and perhaps Jay can also add for some of our training. The question is, how are they going to ensure that non-binary people aren't treated as, quote, cisgender light? Will they, them pronouns be respected?
Thank you for the question. And yes, just to reiterate, the training and consultation that we have done with the community and the advisory group is to really look at language and respectful language. And that is built into our training module 1 that Jay spoke to, and we'll probably add some additional remarks. But a lot of the focus started with inclusive language and making sure that the language is represented in all of our policies, procedures, and forms. And just to reiterate what the chief said, this is an ongoing process, and we are committed to continuing to do this work with the community to make sure that we do get it right. And then Jay may want to add some comments.
Absolutely. And it makes sense to me that this is a question. We've worked to make sure that part of the training module specifically talks about non-binary identities, specifically talks about people's pronouns being important. And I'm going to say I'm saying pronouns and not preferred pronouns, because it recognizes and affirms that your pronouns are your pronouns. That we say non-binary people may use they, them pronouns, but may also use other neo-pronouns. And we give examples of what those are, and that no matter what someone's pronouns are, they need to be used for that person and used consistently. So I want to assure people that that's there. We also include in the training module encouraging officers when they're engaging with the public to introduce themselves with their name and their pronouns as a way to encourage people to share their pronouns in return. And to really emphasize that you can't know someone's pronouns by looking at them. And so to encourage people to always assume you don't know someone's pronouns and always assume you want to ask. We've mirrored these changes in terms of changing forms and any internal space where that kind of information is being kept, so that there's also options for non-binary identities in those places.
Thank you, Jay. The next question I'm going to ask you as well to address, but someone has asked, who is the intended audience for the videos and training that we showed this evening?
So I want to say the videos that we showed this evening are an excerpt of the training. They are not the entire training modules, and we expect that each training module will be about an hour. For the first training module, the intended audience is all TPS employees, so that really any TPS employee. And I will say that making it mandatory for everyone feels essential, because we don't just engage with one group of people, we engage with everyone. The second training manual is specific for sworn officers and court officers, so employees who are engaging in policing activities specifically.
Thank you, Jay. I have a general comment from YouTube that I'd like to maybe just share with the panel, and maybe Chief Raymer, you can speak to it. But the comment that's made is, why are you doing this and who will it help?
We're doing it because we need to do it to improve our performance, ensure that we're treating everybody fairly and with consideration. That's why we're doing it. I mean, we've been doing things wrong. That's been identified with Mr. Kodak's, the circumstances that Mr. Kodak was in, and then having to go to the Human Rights Commission to demonstrate his story. There was findings that were actually quite critical of the organization, and rightly so. And so we want to improve the relationships with all our communities. And that's why we're doing this. And frankly, it is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Chief. Next question I will pose again to maybe Superintendent Crooker, but is it a crime to misgender a citizen or officer?
So that's a great question. And this is something that we actually had ongoing discussion with our committee and collectively as a group for the project. What we have and what's under the Human Rights Commission, misgendering or misidentifying one time is taking ownership and apologizing. But if it's something that is continuously done by a member or an officer or member of our organization, is, yes, under the Human Rights Commission, would be brought forward. So
Thank
one
you.
of the things, and we talked extensively about it and has been built into our training, is as Jay shared in our training, there are going to be opportunities where, as we said, the best is to ask and provide your own identity, your own pronouns, and then respectfully ask. And that is one way in what we're looking towards for the training to make sure that we're not putting anyone in a position. But if it is identified and ongoing, then yes, it would be a breach.
And
Thank
Megan-
you, Superintendent. Oh, sorry.
Megan, can I just add some comments? When earlier at the beginning, we went through this procedure, there's a specific standard of conduct that indicates that a member shall not knowingly, intentionally, or repeatedly misgender any individual. So that, in fact, if that was found to have occurred, then it's a breach of our standards of conduct, and that individual can be disciplined for the conduct.
Thank you, Chief. I have another question here. I will ask Jay to respond. When any of the forms only have male and female options, will gender be reported?
So we have really been working to ensure all forms have multiple options, that we recognize that there are men, there are women, there are non-binary people, there are people who have other identities, that there's room to enter that on forms. What I would say is, if you encounter a form that doesn't represent that at this point in time, we want to know. And we will share contact for the equity and inclusion team, and we'll make sure that those are addressed. This is part of the ongoing work. And part of the settlement was that TPS is to engage in educating other policing partners that TPS engages with in order to create similar recognition and identity and room in other organizations. So where TPS shares systems with other organizations, there are conversations ongoing to ensure that, again, the gender field represents multiple options, and that those multiple options are presented with equal dignity.
Thank you. Another question. Since gender diverse people are disproportionately victims of sexual violence, will there be training and work around not assuming gender of the victim and perpetrator?
I mean, the very short answer is yes, absolutely. We have relied extensively on community statistics as we've done this work. Community statistics show trans and gender diverse people being disproportionately targets for violence, sexualized violence, and other forms of violence. One of the changed policies talks about sexual assault and how to support people who have experienced sexual assault, including not making assumptions around pronouns, and including that someone who is reporting a sexual assault needs to be able to say who they are most comfortable with being part of the investigation and being with them at that point in time. I also would say that community research is very clear that trans and gender diverse people underreport the violence we experience. TPS is aware of that, and having people feel like they could report more of that would be an indicator of increased trust and increased willingness to engage.
Thank you, Jay. A comment, Chief, for you, a actual former member of the Toronto Police Service, a currently serving ally to this community, is incredibly pleased to see the advancements that the service has made in this area. And the question is, what are you most proud of in the work that's been done so far? And how will you know what the indicators of success will be going forward?
Actually, I'm very pleased with the commitment of our people and our team to actually move all of this forward. I mean, Roseanne, Lisa, the equity inclusion team, Dr. Jay's assistants. It's just been, for me, very pleasing to see the advancement. And along the way, as we've been on this journey, I personally have learned so much. And I think as we go forward, the real test, I think, to answer that second part of your question is going to be the evaluation that comes from the training. It's going to be the conduct of our members going forward. It's going to be the evaluations that we will undertake. It'll be input and feedback from the community to see if there's improvements in their interactions with our members. Those are the things that are going to be very important to assess, and to do it maybe 6 months in, doing it a year later, to make sure the training has been maintained and the conduct is maintained and it continues to improve. And I think that's what's going to be very, very important, and what we're going to want to ensure that is being examined. Because again, the most important point is wanting to get positive feedback from the community that in fact all the work that's being undertaken now in the training, we're actually seeing improvement.
Thank you, Chief. Just to ask you again to offer your comments, there's a question: how does the service support its own trans and gender diverse members of the service?
We have our internal networks here in the organization to offer that support. I think one of the best ways that we're doing it as an organization, though, is demonstrating our commitment to this process to change, to improve the conduct, the knowledge, and by improving the conduct, by ensuring the training, the knowledge, the understanding, so that they can act more responsibly, act in a better fashion. And I think that's one of the, I think when you're a member of the organization and you see the organization at all levels, Deputy Demke is here tonight, and I think it further demonstrates the commitment of the senior command of the organization. I frankly think that's one of the most important memberships of the demonstrations to the membership of our commitment, is that we're going to lead by example. And that we're committed to that process of change, and we're going to support our members.
Thank you. Superintendent Crooker, perhaps you could add on to that as well. I know that you have done work with the Internal Support Network and the Community Consultative Committee. Maybe you could even just offer your personal thoughts and experiences as a follow-up to the Chief's comments.
Yeah, I think and just to echo what the Chief has shared, I think it's really important to acknowledge our internal support networks that we have and that we have leveraged. And even as a project team, we have utilized these supports. And it's also a part of bringing awareness to our internal membership and ensuring that our membership feels supported, feels included. And it's really important that as we move forward as a project team, this is work committed to changing the culture, recognizing how we can continue to be progressive and move forward, both with our internal membership and more importantly with the community as well. So I think collectively, as we're looking at better ways that we are working with the community and ensuring that our members receive the best training possible, with understanding that it's going to be fluid and continuous change as we evolve. And as we identify that maybe we didn't get something right, and we're going to adapt and change that. But that's also sends a message internally to our people that we're committed to this work. And I think that will highlight the commitment from the chief and the deputy and the project team to making that change both internally and externally.
Thank you. Oh, Jay, yes, you'd like to add to
I
that?
wanted to add as well. This settlement only involved policy, procedure, and forms that are outward facing. And this has been accompanying work, because if you're going to change as an organization, you can't just change how you engage with the public. You have to change internally as well. And so this has meant changing forms to do with recruitment and people who are joining the service. This has meant looking at policy around how do people who are employees of the service change their name? How do they access health benefits? How do they ensure that their pension access continues? So while the settlement talks about all of these external facing policies, procedures, and forms, there has been accompanying internal work as well that would support employees.
Thank you for that. A question here specifically for you, Jay. I'm wondering if Dr. Jay can speak to the response of the community to these necessary changes, which may take a lot of time.
I often find myself describing this work in what sounds like conflicting terms. That this work is necessary right now, and it's necessary to get it right, and that takes time. So I think there are conflicting forces in that way. I think that there are community members who feel relief, and I think there are community members who feel like this is still not enough. And so I don't think you can say that there is a single trans and gender diverse community, and I don't think you can say that there is a single community response. I would say that every trans, gender diverse person, non-binary person, two-spirit person who's been involved has been involved because they want to make people safer, because they want to know that somebody who is coming into contact with police in any capacity will be treated respectfully, will have their sense of integrity and well-being protected, and will come away feeling safer and well. People are hesitant, people are distrustful, and I will say that in a lot of these conversations, we've talked about how do we know it will work and what happens if it doesn't work. There's a lot of community interest in what are the accountability measures.
So just actually to follow on that comment, I'm just going to go out of order here a little bit, but one of the questions specifically is how will you be evaluating and monitoring gender diverse and trans inclusion implementation? Then how will this be accountable to our community?
So I want to say monitoring is a many-faceted process. We feel very clear about doing pre-test and post-testing with the training. We feel very clear, and this is the gender diverse and trans inclusion team, that training is mandatory and everybody needs to engage in it and pass it within a 6-month window. And we've talked about that being then a disciplinary issue if that's not what happens. The next piece has some questions attached to it. We would see increased reporting as a sign of trust. We've done work with the hate crimes unit to track what has been reported previously and what that might look like. And we need input from the community to say, what are the measures that you are looking for that would suggest this is effective, that would give us a sense of what is and is not working, where further changes are needed. So it's an excellent question around accountability. It is also ongoing, and the answer isn't quite there yet because we have not yet done that community engagement. I will say that as we've done this work, we've also consistently talked about if people aren't treated the way they should be, what is a complaint process? How might people access that, and how might people engage in a complaint process?
Great, thank you. Chief, I'm going to ask you to speak to this question and comment. It says, many gender diverse, disabled, and racialized folks prefer transformative justice to reporting. Are there any plans to support survivors by collaborating with transformative justice initiatives?
I'm not sure I understand that question, Megan.
Well, I think if you could maybe speak perhaps broadly about any relationship the service has to transformative justice initiatives, and then whether those would be considered as part of a process with our gender diverse communities.
Actually, I think I'd rather have Lisa speak to that if I could. And some of the work that's the working group's been doing
Absolutely. So in terms of when we're talking about a lot of work we've been doing with our equity and inclusion unit in terms of working with alternative measures for dealing with community groups. We work a lot with our CCCs in terms of also looking at how we can work through issues or complaint processes respectful. We leverage our equity, inclusion, and human rights unit a lot for information and alternative resources. I'm not sure if I'm really hitting the response to that question enough.
I will, excuse me, I will ask the person who's posed the question about transformative justice if there's more clarification you could offer. If you could do that, please, and we will revisit your question. It would be appreciated. Chief, we do have a question here that we'll go to in the meantime. How do community members who have had negative experiences with Toronto Police make a complaint without fear of retribution?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways to initiate a complaint, and if there's concern about at a police facility, there's also the Office of the OAPRD, an independent review director, so that they can make a complaint there, and that's something that's looked at independent of the police. Although they will need information from the police to conduct that investigation. So that's certainly an avenue. One of the things we've actually discussed is for our March town hall is bringing people in from our professional standards unit, and we're going to explore having an individual from the Office of the Independent Police Review Director to attend and provide information to the community on just would be the best way, and questions that could be asked so that there's a better understanding of the process, and they get it directly from the source and not just necessarily from the police perspective. And I think that would be very helpful and would provide a great deal of assistance to individuals that are concerned about this or do want to make a complaint.
Thank you, Chief. For those of you who may not feel comfortable posing your question in this open forum or have more specific questions that are about a personal experience you've had, we're actually going to add an email or two into the chat function for those who would like to get in touch with someone directly afterwards. I'd also like to ask on behalf of another community member, how does one perhaps get involved in the either community advisory group for this project or the community consultative committee that Superintendent Crooker, perhaps you could speak to that. You've mentioned that committee already.
Well, that's a great question, and we're always looking for members within the community to participate. So currently I'm the co-chair for the LGBTQ2S consultative committee, and happy and welcome all community members to participate. This is a forum driven by the community and an opportunity to be progressive, listen, hear the voices, hear the concerns, and work together to make change, both with a relationship and our internal practices. It's also a way that we keep the community informed, and that's a big piece of our CCCs. And we can post that so that you have connection pieces for the co-chairs to make sure that we have many consultative committees, and we can put that in the chat so that those that are willing and wanting to participate, please, we would encourage all community interactions, and we're always looking for people to come to the table. That's how we really have honest conversation and make change. I would also, in terms of our advisory, however you feel comfortable, put your name forward, obviously reaching out through myself or Roseanne or Jay. This work is going to be ongoing, and the more voices that we hear, the more that we can make sure that we're getting it right. And it's not going to be one time, and we've talked about our commitment. And as the chief has said, we are committed to this work, and we know it's going to be constant change, constant work, and we're committed to that.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to share a comment that was included on the WebEx discussion, but I think it's important to share with those of you who are perhaps watching us tonight on YouTube. It says that this forum and the survey that we mentioned earlier and will be putting out to you a little bit later is about the community determining the desired outcomes and indicators of success to track and ensure the service gets it right. And I think that's just an important point that I wanted to highlight for everybody who's joining us this evening, that your feedback either through this chat this evening or whether you contact us after this meeting or through our next town hall or through the survey. Again, just wanted to highlight the importance of that comment, that it really is about community members determining the desired outcomes and indicators of success to hold the service accountable. I'm going to ask Jay this question from somebody. It says, what do you think will be the biggest barrier to implementation and what will you do to address it? Perhaps that's a question for both you and Chief Raymer, but we'll start with you, Jay.
I mean, I think the barrier is that organizational change is challenging. Organizations develop patterns, they develop practices. I've been doing some in-person training as well as part of this work and asking if people are familiar with the policy changes and the procedure change. People have to know what the changes are in order to be putting them in place. You can't follow a policy and procedure you haven't yet read or engaged with. And so having the training be mandatory means that TPS employees are seeing the policy changes, are thinking about what does this mean, are thinking about the implications. But I think we have to practice things in order to change our behaviors. I think we have to try doing things in ways that are different in order to do that. And I think the more repetitions of that there are, the more we build competency and ability to bring that in. I think that the community knows that these changes are urgent and needed now. And there is frustration that it's not, why aren't we doing this already? And people are going to need to learn, to change, and to be able to do better. So I think the barrier really is time, and how do we make organizational change that needs to happen immediately, as quickly as we can, but well. There was a second part, and I've lost the second part. I'm sorry.
The second part was not just identifying the biggest barrier to implementation, but what will we do to address it?
So, I mean, one of the things we've been doing to address it is ensuring that we're having the conversation in as many ways as possible. So it's not just 2 training modules that are coming out. It's changing internal policy that affects employees as well. It is internal messaging from the chief, again, to say this is important and is necessary all the way down. It's conversations about how this becomes something that is potentially a disciplinary issue if people are not complying. So it's not just this is nice and we want you to do it. This becomes part of people's jobs and part of people's responsibilities. They are in fact required to show respect and care to trans and gender diverse people. I think we are working on building those pieces in, and we're going to continue on working and building those pieces in. But it is about not letting the conversation stop and not letting people ever be able to avoid it or miss it or say, well, I just didn't know.
Thank you for that. Will this training extend to other services and the SIU, which is the Special Investigations Unit? Chief, perhaps you could speak to that.
Yeah, the training that we're doing applies to the Toronto Police Service. Again, something very much needing to be done, and thank Mr. Boyd Kodak for really getting this off the ground. What we do with respect to the SIU and other police services is we will become advocates for change. We can't compel the change, but we become advocates for change in different organizations, be it the SIU or the other police services, other federal authorities. That's what we will do. We'll be advocating for the communities to make sure the documents that they use, the ones that we have to use in conjunction with them in providing our services are changed, that they recognize the changes that we're making in terms of the training of our members, and that their members receive similar training to respect our communities. That's what we'll be doing, and that's what we'll be attempting to do as part of this entire process. Again, I just want to emphasize we can't compel that change, but we are going to advocate for that change.
Thank you, Chief. I'm just going to go back and revisit that question that came in earlier. We've had some clarification, and I thank the participant for doing that. The question is actually about restorative justice processes and examples such as mediation, safety planning, accountability, addressing harm, etc. Most often, but not always, outside of the court system. Is there an opportunity, or are the police considering implementing such options when it comes to dealing with incidents that have been reported by our gender diverse and trans communities?
I'll just comment there, and I think really in many cases what we're actually actively trying to do in many of our interactions is look at diversion processes, and that's very fundamental to the changes that we want to make within the criminal justice system. And I think that really is much of our focus, and we'll be examining that in all cases that we do, not just in terms of all our communities and all our interactions, so that if it's possible and it meets the behavior in question meets a certain threshold, we'll always be looking to advocate now for access to different diversion programs rather than entering into the justice system.
Thank you. Sorry, Superintendent, did you have something to add to that, or?
No, just to echo what the chief has said, is we're always looking for alternative ways to address communities and looking at how we can work with our partners to meet those community needs. So just to echo what the chief said, looking at alternative measures to make sure that we're addressing all communities in a respectful and safe way.
Thank you very much. Jay, perhaps I could ask you to talk about our upcoming consultation session in March, and when those participants that are listening this evening can expect to get some more information about that.
So we'll be putting out more information about the March session, I want to say fairly shortly, and I'm looking at other folks in the GDTI team. Dates for that are already out. There's information about that to some extent already. We'll have representation from the Ontario Human Rights Commission at that, talking about data collection and what data collection processes are possible. I will say that the Ontario Human Rights Commission has reviewed materials across this. They've reviewed policy, procedure, forms, and training. So their role in this has also been an ongoing role. And we really will be engaging with community around what does accountability look like? What would success look like? What does it look like if TPS is not meeting success? Really, the requirement of the minutes of settlement is the community will put in place what the appropriate assessment is. And that's what accountability looks like. It is saying TPS will do internal measures and checks, but TPS cannot be the only body looking at, is this working?
Hi, good evening all. It's Roseanne Bailey just behind the scene. So one of the things that we were trying to do, especially for this one, this town hall, was actually do a bit of a hybrid method, but obviously COVID had other plans. And so we have tentatively booked Regent Park Community Center for our March 23rd event, and it's at the same time from 6:30 p.m. until about 8:30 p.m. We'll have it as a hybrid model, so we will actually be broadcasting that for people who would like to still participate. Again, this session here will be recorded and actually posted on our website and also shared through social media, so that if anyone did miss any of the information, they could actually still get that. And also the link will be shared publicly so that we can actually get back response from individuals in a little bit more detailed way. We also understand that some people might be shy to actually put some things in the chat or even be able to answer the 5 questions that we had posted earlier. We do depend on community to give us feedback in order for us to be able to make this work. We can create as much of the content, but if we can't actually have community members say, this is how we'd like the service to be evaluated, or this is what I would need in order for this training to actually look like, then we've kind of failed if we haven't been able to do that. So we're hoping to actually get as much feedback as possible, as this is a consultation. And we're hoping to hear from as many people as we can. So if you do get the link, we will definitely share that. We'll send that out via email. And as well, if you can share it with your networks and then also participate in the March session as well.
Thank you, Roseanne. I'm actually going to just take a moment to share our screen again, because I want to share the survey link that we've mentioned a couple of times this evening. There it is up on the screen. If you can make note of that, again, that is one of the options available to you to provide feedback for us for all of the reasons that Roseanne and our panel guests have shared this evening. The survey will be open
Until March 31st.
until March 31st. So please share it with your contacts, your friends, your colleagues, anybody else who you think would like to share some feedback with us and be part of this process. I'll leave that up while I just do a bit of a last call for any more questions or comments. I know that they've slowed down on both of our platforms this evening. Certainly don't want to close off the evening unless somebody still has a comment or a question. Again, the survey is open until March 31st for anybody who would like to participate. While we just wait to see if there are any final comments or questions. And sorry, we've just had one come in, so I'm just going to stop sharing the screen for a moment if I can. Again, this question's directed to Dr. J. Do you think there's anything missing within this plan? Meaning, were there pieces that ideally would have been implemented, but due to constraints were not implemented?
So I really want to describe this as a start to this work and not as an end to this work. In the community consultation, in interviews with trans and gender diverse people, we really heard a huge range of what people think would help them feel safer, what people think would help them trust police better, what people think it would look like to have a police service that serves their needs. That list of recommendations has been shared internally. Not all of them are addressed in terms of policy, procedure, forms, and training. And there are ongoing conversations about a number of those pieces. There are certainly overlaps with ongoing work connected to LGBTQ communities more broadly. There is ongoing work connected to missing and missed. And how do we ensure that this work is happening across the board and in many places? So I want to say it's not done. There are recommendations still being considered and still being talked about and addressed and looked at. There is absolutely the possibility for more work and more work in different areas.
Chief, perhaps you can answer this next question. It says, will you provide an update next year as an accountability mechanism?
We absolutely will. We're going to keep the community updated on a regular basis and want them to be involved in evaluating the program. And I mean, I think as I've said earlier, that's what we're going to do is we're going to hold our people accountable to the process. I mean, Dr. J mentioned earlier about change in a big organization, and he was right on in terms of his comments. But what I can tell you is that the command team is going to lead by example, and our people will be held accountable. And then I think that's what we will do as a command team. And then we will ask the community to hold us accountable by evaluating our progress in the program.
Thank you. And perhaps Superintendent Crooker, you could also speak to some of the ongoing reporting and work, again, just to complement the comments by Jay with respect to our upcoming consultation session as well.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, just was going to ask if you could again mention the upcoming consultation sessions and maybe just some of the ongoing, if you had any specifics about some of those reporting mechanisms that the chief just talked about that are more specific to the project.
Yes, just to reiterate what the chief said, the accountability piece will be what is key to measure success of this. And it's very hard. We've talked about what does success look like, but the community feedback and feedback after interactions with members is key. And I encourage everybody to participate in that survey. That's what helps us understand to make sure that we're getting it right. And just to reiterate what Jay had said, this is going to be an ongoing process, and this is just the beginning of this work. It's incredibly important work. We're committed to this work, and the consultation with the communities and the partnerships that we build and the healing that goes on through this is critical to moving this project forward and to the continued work with our community.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Again, not seeing any other questions that come up or comments. Pardon me, we have another one here directed to the chief. As one of the larger, more publicized police forces, do you think that TPS is tasked with being a trailblazer on innovation and the advancement in law?
Actually, that's a good question, and I think in fact we are. I think as you know, the fourth largest city in North America, and the tremendously diverse communities that we have within the city, it creates a venue, circumstances for so many different contacts, community concerns, situations that with just under so many different diverse circumstances that the policing community has to interact. And so I think you're absolutely right that as this large organization, we find ourselves quite often leading the country in terms of changes in policing, very much because of the communities that we police. And so quite frankly, that's a good thing. But it is very much because we are a large organization and we have so many diverse communities that we have to ensure that we're adapting to actually police those communities appropriately and take into account all the different issues and concerns within those communities. So yes, I very much agree that is very much a change that we often see as part of, the Toronto Police Service, and that will often lead the country. And so, when we spoke earlier about, can we see the changes with other police services in the SIU? I think eventually you will see the changes, and you will see the changes as a result of what's happening here in Toronto. The community input that is provided that will help us be a better organization addressing these concerns. And so you will see other services follow suit because what is being achieved here. And that's why the community input that we receive to make this the best possible program is so vitally important, because it will lead to other organizations, be they policing, other federal institutions, other agencies that the community will interact with. Those changes will be made because what we're experiencing and going through right now. So again, I just emphasize, get involved with us. You're going to find that you're going to engage with a team of people that have a genuine and sincere commitment to change and making things better. And this is the opportunity to get it right. So, March is coming up. Please get involved because it will have an impact. And what happens here will impact across the country in a much broader way.
Thank you, Chief. As we start to wrap up this evening, I'm going to next ask Superintendent Crooker if she has any sort of last comments or remarks that she'd like to make. I will then ask Jay to follow up as well before we give the final word back to the chief. But Superintendent, is there anything that you'd like to share with our communities this evening?
Absolutely. So first of all, I would like to thank the team, Mr. Kodak, for being instrumental, Dr. J, Roseanne, and all advisory committee members for being a voice and being a part of this commitment to this change in the work. I can tell you on a personal note, and having conversations and listening to members of the community, the struggles and the scars. So this work, as we talk about moving forward, is not just work, but it's also an opportunity for healing. And this has been an ongoing discussion that we want to contribute to the healing, to making it better, to making it right, and to making sure that we do the right things in a fair and transparent way. And that's where community input and being a contributing member from communities to participate is so vitally important, so we can hear your voice. And it's also really important to have that voice. I am grateful to have been a part of this work. I am constantly learning and growing. I have learned so much working with this team. I can tell you their passion and commitment is invaluable, and through all the members of the community that have come forward and participated in some component. Your work and commitment and passion is invaluable, and I thank you for all that. And I'm just grateful to have been a part of this and to work towards that change and continue with the product that we're trying to push forward and to make change within the culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say that this is not easy work. Nothing about this has been easy. And individual community consultations have involved hearing a lot of trauma. And I really feel like part of my role has been to say what has happened in the past needs to change. People have been hurt. People have felt dismissed, belittled. Really, trans and gender diverse people have said, we don't trust you. And I want to say we've had a lot of engagement with community where the question has been, these policies look okay. Sometimes these policies look good. How do I know there's going to be follow through? What does that look like? And so it feels really important to say that has been repeated across the work of this project. I really do feel like that has been heard internally to TPS. Nobody has said to me, well, trans and gender diverse people just need to trust us. And I think there is an awareness that TPS needs to demonstrate that trustworthiness and needs to be able to model what good policing for trans and gender diverse people could be like. And that trust from community will follow trustworthiness being demonstrated. I don't imagine that this work is going to get easier. I think this work is going to continue to be difficult. And And I think it is necessary. And that the work is better the more people who are able to participate it and contribute to it and be part of it. And I want to acknowledge that that's not possible for all community members. And so I'm constantly, as I'm working on this, thinking about what about the community members who don't yet feel safe to engage, who don't feel like that's a possibility for them? What change needs to happen for them to feel like that might be something they could do? So it's trauma work, it's difficult work, it is a huge change. That is really being heard internal to the service. And I think there is possibility for considerably bigger change as we keep going. Trust from community will follow trustworthiness being demonstrated. And really that's the invitation that I think is there for TPS.
Thank you, Jay. Chief, we will turn the mic over to you for final comments this evening.
Okay, thanks, Megan. I just want to thank Roseanne Bailey, Dr. J, Superintendent Crooker, and the entire team for their perseverance, their dedication, and some really, really outstanding work. You know, I can really appreciate the reluctance of some members of the community to get involved, but I'm going to ask you to take a chance. We have an outstanding team of individuals that are committed to this process of change. Take a chance to work with this team. And again, and I'll just repeat what I said earlier, with a team of people that have a genuine and sincere commitment to change. Just give us a chance. And I want to thank you for being here tonight and participating, and look forward to, hopefully in person, getting an opportunity to meet some of you at the March Town Hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Again, we are grateful for your participation this evening. We would again remind you of our survey that's available till March 31st, our upcoming consultation, which will be later in March, and more information will be forthcoming about that. Again, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. We are grateful for those who come forward to listen and to share. It is the entire purpose of why we're here this evening, and we look forward to continuing this work and these conversations going forward. Please enjoy the rest of your evening and be safe. Thank you.